Ikemba, you muted it.
Hey, peace, everyone. Welcome to another episode of We Charge Colonialism podcast and book club. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm Ikemba, member of the Public Relations Committee.
Peace, y'all. Tierney Cherie. I am the steering committee chair for We Charge Colonialism.
Peace, family. This is Frank, chair for the Political Action Committee for WCC.
All right. So we are your team this morning, and we have some things that we're going to talk about as usual that are in the news that I think is very important. So we're going to begin with Frank and what's taking place in Cuba. I was looking at that article. It's a little old, but still relevant though. So yeah, go ahead. You want to tell us what's happening?
Yeah, like you said, it's a little old, but in a couple of years, by like either 2 or 3 years, but still relevant in today's event. As we saw what happened with COVID 19, where Cuba, was forced with the fight, for COVID, and on the other hand, we saw the United States and her other going against Cuba for taking its medical experts to the war stage in helping other countries to combat COVID. So what happened in Cuba, and I think it's still going on. As we all know, Cuba is one of the nations that have, when it comes to medical doctor, they have experts and they provide for themselves. So Cuba is currently providing vaccination for cancer or treatment for cancer. And majority of U.S. patients, as we all know, one of the leading sickness in the United States is cancer. So a lot of citizens or a lot of U.S. Residents are leaving the United States secretly, going to Cuba for treatment because of the ban or the sanction Cuba, let's say the United States have put on Cuba because of some long-term historical event where Cuba, want to stand on her own and want to fight on her own, with what Fidel Castro did. So the United States still having that kind of a sentiment in their mind and going against Cuba, even though Cuba is doing the right thing. So there's an article out there about one of a U.S. resident, and many of them that are traveling to Cuba secretly to seek treatment because of the ban the United States have on Cuba. And so the question here is, sometimes like Nelson Mandela said, for any other reason that somebody became your enemy, do not make me to be an enemy to that person. I'm just paraphrasing. So if you're an enemy to another person or entity or a country, don't make me an enemy to that person, because that person may be helpful to me in some other way. So one of the patients that went to Cuba for treatment, and he stated something. This is what he said here. He said, so before that, so if you are going as a U.S. patient who having cancer and the United States cannot help you, and you are going Cuba, it is against the law for you to go to Cuba for treatment because of the ban. So this is what one of the patients said. I'm not going to call name, because in the interview when they were coming up this article, some of them stated that they didn't want for their name, to be given, so they only give their first name. So he said here, I am not looking to break the law, but I am not looking to die either. And he said, people with stage 4 cancer, and this guy has stage 4 cancer in the research. So he said, people with stage 4 cancer like me should be allowed to try whatever they want to stay alive, whatever they think will work for them. The last thing they need is the government on your neck over some hatchet regulation saying that just take what is available here and die here than to go to Cuba to take treatment and live. So this is a kind of thing we are going through just because of political entity or government entity hit another country. And while you're in your country and you are dying from a disease created and where you can go to another country, but because the country you live in does not have a good relationship with the country that you need to go for treatment, they prefer you staying and die.
Yeah, I think looking at this article, it just highlights the what we're going to have to do as African people, or go through as African people once we become a self-determined and liberated people. Our fortitude is going to be tested. What's happening with Cuba? You have like this Cold War that's still going on with Cuba. For what reason, right? They're still upset with Cuba for liberating themselves, and it just goes to show that the United States hasn't gotten over this colonial nation, this nation that was a colony, overthrowing the yoke of oppression and colonialism. If you go back to Cuba's history, this was a playground for the United States. They controlled the economy there. The people were being exploited and oppressed, and this has been a history of Cuba ever since the Spanish colonized Cuba and enslaved Africans and brought them to that island. So the revolution was fought, they was victorious, and now the United States continues to want to make them pay for that victory. Because Cuba, what military threat does Cuba present to the United States? None whatsoever. So what's the issue that the United States has with Cuba? They can't get over it that they're a free and sovereign nation. It has no political economic ties or dependency on the United States. Remember Haiti. This is why Haiti has suffered. Anytime African people, indigenous people liberate themselves from the colonizer wants them to pay for all of the lost labor and property from this severing of ties. But yeah, I don't know, Tierna, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that you guys said. So a few things, like you said, there's really no threat, militarily threat. Back in the day, they used to use the Cold War as the reason why, but as we know, the Cold War is no longer going on. So I challenge everyone, ask your representatives, your Congress, members of Congress or whatever, why is it that you have a position still against Cuba when they don't pose a threat? Why is it that you're trying to make someone pay for something that has nothing to do with the current situation? But the other funny thing is that, when it comes to the medical field, we know that the pharmaceutical companies in America want to have a monopoly, and to ensure that they're able to basically treat us like we don't have any other choices. And we see this happening over and over again. When it comes to cancer, this is the number one killer of people. We know that the medical field here is not necessarily built to do away with our diseases, but it's many times, for my opinion, it's meant to continue the diseases because it makes money for a lot of people. And when you look at socialized medicine, what Cuba does is it gives people an alternative, because if you're so used to only seeing one remedy and you're not going to challenge, why is it that the system here is not like the system there? So the question should be is, how is it for all of us? How is it that this small country that's very poor, because of, in comparison to the United States, if you're comparing Cuba to the US, it very much has limited resources. How is it that they're able to heal people? How is it that they're able to travel the world and provide medical care for different people? How is it that they're able to train doctors in Africa? How is it not the case? And I promise you, whenever you look at the system there that prioritizes people over profits, that's something that's a threat to the West. And that's why they try their best to isolate Cuba.
Indeed, and it sounded like that was a segue too. You was talking about the vaccines and all of that. But definitely, I agree. I unite with what everything that was said. And I think we have to really support Cuba because Cuba has always supported the African liberation movement, and our leaders. Asada Shakur herself, is in Cuba under asylum. We had Robert F. Williams was there one time. He had to flee America because what these white racists were trying to do to him here in this country. So they have always supported. I think Huey P. Newton had to go to Cuba at one point. So we have to support Cuba because Cuba does support the African liberation movement. At least I know historically they have. And so, as long as we, continue to support them, I think that they will aid us in our struggle. But yeah, like I said, segue. So you have a story about these vaccine patents that you want to bring to light, Taryn?
Yeah, it's kind of a follow-up because we covered this story before. We were talking about how the United States pharmaceutical companies had blocked the countries inside of not just Africa, but really poorer countries in general. They blocked them from the ability to obtain the vaccine patents because they wanted to ensure that they had a monopoly on the vaccines. Well, out of nowhere, the United States starts reversing course. In my opinion, is that it's not really out of nowhere, because as you see, the economy is starting to stabilize and the United States is kind of going back to normal. But the big threat, I think, on everyone's horizon is that they see what's happening in India. And if you look at the horrible, horrible situation, I mean, it's something that's crazy going on over there. It's not even just the same vaccine or the same strand of COVID. They said it's like a double mutant strand of COVID. So clearly, America's looking over at India and saying, oh crap, like maybe we should try to do something to, help them to help us, not because they care about India, but because they want to ensure that strand of COVID does not come into the United States. So Biden put out a statement that now, way over a year, and months after they had the original vaccines that they started putting out, now they said, oh, we want to help to pretend to be humanitarian, but we all know by now that everything is profit driven, everything is self-centered whenever it comes to the politicians here, but they get to pretend that they're doing so for humane reasons. The other interesting, sorry for the background noise, everyone. The other interesting thing about this whole thing is that the pharmaceutical companies are very much opposed to this, and they're still opposed to it. They're saying that these releasing the patents aren't going to help because obviously they're going to lose the profit that they would have gotten. So yeah, it's very rare that you see the country kind of distance from the pharmaceutical companies in the stance, but that's kind of what's happening now. But again, I think it's because Biden's thinking long term. They don't want this COVID variant to come into the United States.
Yeah, I think those, all of those are great points. I was asking myself that question, like, what was this reversal all about? Because every move that the United States make, or these colonizers make, it's always going to serve their interests first. And so we have to remember that. And I think like this right here is just another example of African lives literally being in the hands of these colonizers, of Europeans, of white people. I think it's very important that, we understand that these pharmaceutical companies, they have already they cornered the market. They made, I want to say billions of dollars. I don't have an exact number, but billions of dollars, right? And what's going to happen, even with this reversal, the pharmaceutical companies, once you patent something, after a certain amount of years, you get intellectual property or whatever, after a certain amount of years, it's open, that intellectual property is open and available for other people to be able to use without being penalized. So these pharmaceutical companies are just looking to make as much money as they can before these other companies or competition are able to use the same formula. So with that being said, even with this, these other companies being able to use this intellectual property, these pharmaceutical companies do not have to give them the formula. So there's still going to be that process of reverse engineering and trying to figure it out. It's not like, hey, this is how you do it. And that's going to take time. And also, everybody is not in alignment or in agreement. European countries are not in agreement with the United States. So there's still like this process of trying to like, negotiate and come to a consensus on how this is going to look. The last point too is that these pharmaceutical companies, like in these African countries, the companies, they don't even have the infrastructure or the manufacturing companies to be able to house these vaccines. And so with this delay, it still is going to take time. It will still take years for them to even be able to start to come up with a vaccine to be able to help their population. Now, with all that being said, at the end of the day, African people have to be self-determined, and we have to, understand that we don't necessarily have to mimic the way that these colonizers are doing things. Like, we have the way it is now is like, this is the vaccine, and we're looking to them as like the savior, like they have the answer to our problems. And so we're in a precarious situation when we have to rely upon our enemy to secure our health, to protect our health and our lives. So that's just another layer to it all. But I don't know, Frank, if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I just want to add to something quick. I was talking to somebody last night, and the person working in the medical field in the United States here as well. So what the person do is that they travel. The person is a travel nurse or travel doctor. So the person came from North Dakota. So we were talking last night, and the person said to me, which of course is something that we already know. And the person said to me, for every medication in this country, medication within a Black community, within a Black neighborhood, the strength of it is different. The dose is different from the medication or that is going within the white neighborhood. And this is somebody that work in the medical field. Like I said, the person traveled from state to state. So, and I said, and the person said, yeah, all the medication within a Black neighborhood, the dose are different, the strength are different, and all of those things. So what am I saying here? What I want for people to understand, or African to understand, is that with this COVID-19, it should be able to waken up our mind, especially on the African continent, that leaders, private organization, and government should work together to equip our medical facility, our doctor, so that they can come out with their own sense of treatment. They can work with Cuba. If Cuba can do it, we can do it. Because let me say this, they have already predicted the next pandemic that is coming very soon. So in other words, they are already working on that pandemic to release it. When are we going to release it? We don't know. But it's going to come out very soon. And that is why they are pushing their own vaccine and trying to make sure to step or to kneel on other vaccine like Cuba, who is coming out with their vaccine thing, because they know that whatever vaccine that comes from Cuba, these pharmaceutical companies, they're not going to benefit, they're not going to make money. So they are going to work by any means necessary to suppress Cuba, to step on Cuba, so that they can come out with their next vaccine. And the next vaccine that is coming out, that's why they're pushing this whole how they call it, corona vaccine stuff. So once you take it, and all those that have taken this vaccine, the next pandemic that coming, they don't have to struggle again, to tell people to go take it, because in your mind, oh well, I took the first vaccine, nothing happened to me, I'm okay, I'm fine. So once the second pandemic comes and they bring the vaccine, automatically people are going to take it. You see it? So they're not going to like run campaign here and there and things. So that's why they are pushing their vaccine and stepping on other people's neck from producing their vaccine. So let us get in mind, the next pandemic, they already predicted it is coming very soon, and they are already working on that to release it, to destroy people. So again, we as Africans, we should know that these vaccines that are coming into our community is different from the vaccine they give it to white people. That called is spay. It's different. So don't think I'm going to a clinic and a white person going to that same clinic, we are going to get our same vaccine. That is why, if you really take a notice, Before you take the vaccine, they ask you, like my job, they ask you to send in your name and your days and your date and your information and stuff so that they can prepare, the vaccine before you even get there. So before you get there, they already know who is coming to take the vaccine. They already know what kind of vaccine they're going to give to you that is different from the person that doesn't look like you. So it's just an example that we should be alert.
Absolutely. I think, just like this story, I think it connects a lot of these stories that we cover every week. We see the same sort of pattern of colonialism, African people just being dependent upon Europeans, white people for their protection, for their defense. And I think like if anything that we need to take from this is, right now, like we have to be organizing for self-determination. We have to be fighting and overthrowing colonialism. Like anytime we have to look to them for, vaccinations to prevent, ailments that we have or viruses that are plaguing, our people that has historically, have been, committing acts of genocide against our people. Like that's a serious contradiction. So, with this whole, this story, I think we have to like really, I think that this is why these conversations are important. So we can give like another perspective, sort of like decolonize our worldview, or help people decolonize their worldview on these different, these different things that are happening, throughout the world that's impacting and affecting us. So I don't know, we're going to move on to the next story, which I think is another example of, once again, African people depending on foreign powers for their defense and protection. And so over in Mali, what we have is British troops who have been there since January, a few hundred, somewhere around 300 troops, which is, when I think about it, like 300 troops were sent into Mali to keep the peace. And these are armed troops who their lieutenant has said, we're well equipped and well armed, and they're ready for anything. And so they're there to keep the peace, right? And they have somewhere around 15,000 to 18,000 peacekeepers. Mali has 15 to 18,000 peacekeepers in their country right now. So all these people who claim to be keeping the peace are actually there fighting I'm call it a proxy war. And it's so reminiscent of what was happening, with these colonizers when they were fighting these proxy wars with the Soviet Union. So they're there fighting Islamic, extremists. I've been watching like videos on this, and they're probably airing it more so in Europe, like in France. But there's like documentaries and series where they're covering French military over there fighting these extremists. And every time they're labeling the people that they're fighting against, they're calling them terrorists. So, they're already dehumanizing this group of African people, calling them terrorists. So now when they're killing them, we don't look at them as another, group of human beings who is fighting for their liberation. Now, whether we agree with this group or not, the Tuareg people of northern Mali are fighting for their national liberation. They want to separate from the country of Mali. And so this has been going on since 2012, sort of like this civil conflict. But the French have been there prior to the British coming in there. The French have been there fighting these extremists. But the fact that we have the African countries are constantly going outside of Africa seeking help from Europeans who have historically have colonized these same countries. That's a contradiction, and that's a serious problem that needs to be overturned. And it's not just the people of Mali have been calling for Mali to be able to solve their own problems. And so there is a group who are calling for these colonizers to come back in. And so, I think like there's that eternal conflict of figuring out how to solve this problem. But AFRICOM, France, the British. They're there for their own interests, and they've had a foothold in this place for hundreds of years, and we need to get them out of there. The last thing is like France last year had bombed a wedding, and 19 civilians were killed. I think it was, when was this? It was January, I believe. And the French still to this day have not owned up to the bombing and killing of these 19 civilians at this wedding. And there has been an investigation, UN investigation, who has found that it was true that they had killed civilians, but the France will not own up to this. So this is just another example of just the lack of empathy or care for the people that are on the ground that live in Africa. But yeah, let me open it up. I said a lot.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I think you hit so many nails on the head. The thing about these presents, the colonial presents, that we should keep in mind, it's ongoing. Like, there's no way you're going to, no way that they're going to say, okay, we think things are fine now, so hey, stop. So we're going to leave. That's the one thing. But the other thing is that, as you said, the Islamic or the terrorist label, the terrorist label that's put on side of groups. We don't necessarily agree with all these groups. Some of them are doing horrible atrocities. Some of these groups are definitely not helpful to the people. But what we have to understand is that we have to be careful with certain labels, because if you're not going to call France a terrorist, if you're not going to call Britain a terrorist, and they've done many atrocities, then clearly this label is only going to apply to anti-colonial forces. And that's a dangerous thing. The other thing to keep in mind is that extremism only increases with the colonial presence inside of a territory. It doesn't decrease. So if you're really trying to get rid of these threats, whether it's Boko Haram, whether it's Hezbollah, or whether it's ISIS, whatever, if you're trying to get rid of these threats, you have to get rid of the colonial presence and allow the people to deal with it on their own. Unfortunately, part of colonialism is that we have not built an independent military. And I mean, Africa wide, we need a united African military, not dependent on foreign forces. So any type of military exercises by the African governments are just going to be proxy wars by nature, because you're not having a people who are in control of their destinies. We've seen over and over again how these things play out. And like I said, it's endless. The bloodshed is endless. And unfortunately, until the people have a real sense that they have the capacity and the ability to independently form military forces as a bloc, don't just have one country, because understand that leaves the whole of Africa vulnerable. Let's have a collective African military. Until we have that sense, then we're going to continue to have leaders who are going to give in to the colonial forces and allow them to come in and do what they want and face no consequences, even whenever they've committed human rights atrocities. That wedding situation was very sad, but it's not beyond the normal. These things happen all the time, and they just paint over them. It's funny. I think whenever it originally happened, they said, "Oh, we didn't kill any civilians. We just killed some of the people who were terrorists." Again, using that label to absolve themselves of any responsibility. So again, yes, these things are the norm.
Indeed. Go ahead, Frank. You wanted to add?
Yeah, let me just add something quick because we're running out of time. First of all, we have to also let African people know that ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and these terrorist groups in the Middle East were all created by the imperialists and the colonialists. So if these groups are being introduced on a continent, we should also know that they are being created and supported by the imperialists and the neo-colonialists. For the same reason, they created these terrorist groups in the Middle East to destabilize the place and take away their resources. Now, let me just give a typical example of this. 300 troops in Mali, right? Okay, fine, good, that's good. Now, just in a single city in Somalia, Ouagadougou, there was over 300 United States military or Marine, and they could not fight a city in Somalia, in Ouagadougou, the Black Hawk Down, for typical example, they could not fight the army or the civilians within that city to the extent that they die and they have to call in the United Nations to go in to rescue them. So how can 300 troops protect an entire country of Mali? That should sink into African head that these are fallacy. They are there for something different. They are there to support these tolerant groups that they create. They are there carrying arms and ammunition. They are the one providing medical supplies to these people. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, that was a mic drop. Hey,
yeah, I was just say the same thing.
Nah, but it's it's ridiculous. There's no discussion being had over the economy, and there's so many factors that we don't even have enough time to cover. And so maybe even maybe next week we talk about like some of those factors that has made this region, this country and this region so unstable. So I want to before we make this transition into this reading, I'm really looking forward to this discussion too. So we're going to be reading from the Black Radical tradition. There should be a link for everyone to have access to this reading. We're on page really quickly 77, so everybody can get to there. And so I want to encourage everybody to visit our website and follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We Charge Colonialism. And send us an email. Find out how you can get involved. Become a member of We Charge Colonialism, and do it today. And find out how you can be a part of this this fight, this struggle, to be recognized as a nation that is colonized by a foreign power. So find out how you can get involved by emailing info@wechargecolonialism.org. info@wechargecolonialism.org. So also stick around with us to the end. We have a couple of announcements. There's a few events that's coming up this month that we want you all to be informed about. So I'm gonna let at the end, I'm gonna let Frank do that. So Frank, be prepared. So we're at Negro Liberation on page 77. That's where we're at, right? Oh no, sorry, 78. We're on page 78. Effect on the Negro. And this is from The Negro Nation by Harry Haywood. All right, so I know everybody's going to be really eager to say something. I'm going to go through this whole section first, all right? So the effect on the Negro. In the ideology of race, the dominant classes have a much more potent weapon at their disposal than even religion and language. The latter, as social phenomena, are historically transient, whereas race, a physical category, persists. And once a people has been smeared with the stigma of racial inferiority, they are ipso facto ruled out as unworthy of nationhood and its inherent right of self-government, a right which in itself is presumed to be the special privilege of superior races. This deliberately cultivated emphasis on the racial factor, particularly on the aspect of color differences, has not been without its adverse effect upon the Negro. It has indeed acted as a retardation on the growth of political self-assertion. The fog of racist obscurantism thrown up by his oppressors has made difficult clear political orientation, that is, the job of locating and thus confronting the real enemy, the forces of monopoly capitalism. It is therefore not surprising that until quite recently, Negro protest has been shunned off into the blind alley of a defensive racialism. What is in reality an aspiration for identity as a nation has sought expression through false symbols of race foisted on him by white rulers. He has perforce it's another word. Define his fight for freedom as a fight for racial equality, racial opportunity. Manifestly, the Negro problem cannot be defined by any racial formula. Ideologically, they obscure the economic and political conditions for the achievement of Negro equality and impede the full and necessary clarity as to the nature of the issue. They are tank traps to block the road to the understanding of the profound revolutionary implications of the struggle of the Negro people for liberation. The maintenance of the pariah status of Negro Americans, their lack of equality, is an integral part of the policy of American finance capital. That policy has for its objective the achievements of the following. 1, the artificial and forcible stifling of the free economic and cultural development of the Negro through racist persecution as a basic condition for maintaining his super exploitation and for maintaining the degradation of the great mass of Southern white folks. 2, the infection of the organism of American democracy with the virus of race hatred as a deterrent to the formation of a common front of labor and democratic people against the common enemy, monopoly capitalism. The fulcrum of that policy is the retention by monopoly of the slave survivals in the Black Belt as an essential economic and social base for its allies, the decadent, Bourbon squirearchy of the South, and now this policy has led to the conversion of the entire South into a bulwark behind which the most noxious forms of native fascism are rallying for a full-scale sortie against the democracy of the whole country and the world. So now we go over this. I know it was a lot y'all wanted to talk about there, but I was like, let me get through this whole section.
Okay, I want to pop in. It reminded me, like in the beginning, we was talking about, you know, the issue of self-determination and how that's basically been taken out by like this. How that's kind of been taken out from a lot of our rhetoric and from our movement, the idea of self-determination, and instead we're focused on racial justice. It reminded me of what Brother Obi Igbuna said when he was on my channel. He said, we're no longer talking about power. We're instead talking about justice. So justice is the ceiling, not power. And that's very true with our people. Whenever you see these conferences, these talks, these discussions about what are the problems with Africans in America, all these people want to talk about is justice. They're more concerned with reparations than they're concerned with Black people actually being able to control those reparations. And this is the new way to pacify resistance, is to make people think they have a stake inside of this system, make people think that there are things that can be fixed in this system, instead of making them think that they have to take power over their own destinies. So that very much reminded me of that.
Yes. In addition to that, with the chapter, it also kind of explain some aspect of what will be discussed, within the next coming weeks about decolonization and also the need for a new economic system. So when you really pay attention, this part of the reading kind of also gave out a perspective, a direction of focus on, what we should do as well as African people. When you really look at it, the chapter is also telling us that the more you keep begging someone who inflict pain on you, the more that person going to enjoy what he or she is doing to you, because he feel or she feel that power within him or her to keep inflicting that pain, because he or she feel superior. Why? You are the inferior person. So for that reason, that person going to give you freedom? It could be 50-50. That person could give you freedom, or that person could not give you freedom. And it's possible that person will not give you freedom, or that person will not empower you, because it is in the mind of that person who inflict pain on you that if I empower this person, if I free this person, This person might come back to me to harm me or to harm my children or my family or whosoever that is connected to me. So do I want to empower this person, or should I continue to inflict pain on this person? That is what this chapter is talking about. We cannot keep begging for justice. We cannot keep begging our oppressor for freedom. We have to free ourselves. We have to empower ourselves. We have to wake up and feel that we are self-determined people.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, when I was reading this, just thinking about how, race, this as race as a social construct is determined by, like, people are categorized by biology or makeup, skin color, phenotype, and so forth. But what you have is a dispersed group. It doesn't speak to nationhood, and I think like that's the difference when you talk about the Black race as opposed to saying the Black nation or the African nation, right? And so when you talk about the African nation, you sort of like when you talk about nationhood, you're talking about a particular social and cultural system that we have agreed upon as a group of people, saying like this is how we're going to operate as a nation. Now within that nation, you may have subcategories or subcultures that exist because there isn't this we're not a homogenous or a monolithic people, but we can come together on the basis of nationhood and understanding our common interests as a people, especially like dealing with colonialism. And so in this first paragraph, even when it talks about racial inferiority, it says that, and once a people has been smeared with the stigma of racial inferiority, they are ipso facto ruled out as unworthy of nationhood and its inherent right of self-government, a right which in itself is presumed to be the special privilege of the super races. It reminds me of even Abraham Lincoln. This is the idea of white superiority or white supremacy. Abraham Lincoln himself, after the Civil War ended, or during the Civil War, he had made the comment he's not trying to make Negro jurors or politicians or something like that, right? He said like he believed that in a superior race and inferior race, and if there's going to be a superior race, he's for the white race. Like that was Abraham Lincoln. And so, that I think like these things we're dealing with white supremacy, white superiority. It kind of African people start to believe that we can't develop and create a nation of our own and be self-determined. And so we have to look to them for their vaccines and all of these other things. But yeah. Just wanted to make that point. So we'll go on to the next section, real nature of the problem. So the secret to unraveling the tangled skein, the secret of unraveling the tangled skein of America's Negro question lies in its consideration as the issue of an oppressed nation within the borders of the United States and under the jurisdiction of a single central government. There exists not one, but two nations, a dominant white nation with its Anglo-Saxon hierarchy and a subject Black one. Unlike the white immigrant minorities, the Negro wearing his badge of color, which sets the seal of permanency on his inferior status, cannot, under contemporary economic and social conditions, be absorbed into the American community as a full-fledged citizen, limited as this absorption is in practice, even for large sections of the white minorities. He cannot hope to escape as long as the status quo remains unchanged in the South. True, there are colored minorities, such as the colored Latin American Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, and others. There are Orientals and remnants of the American Indians, but these also are tarred with the brush of color and are in the main relegated to the category of unassimilables outside the limits of majority democratic tradition. But the classification of the Negro as a minority leaves unanswered the question posed long ago by George W. Cable, a foremost champion of Negro rights. why 1/10 of the population, all natives of the United States, and by law an inseparable part of the nation, do not have the same full measures of citizenship that they would have were they entirely of European rather than of partially African descent. For really, as Cable put it, the Negro remains in America a perpetual alien. Anybody want to make any comments on that?
Frank, you want to go first, or? So I'll make comments on the nation within a nation. It's nice to know. When did you say this was written, Ikemba?
I was thinking the same thing. I just looked, 1948.
Yeah, so it's so funny how we think we're so original, like when we come up with concepts and like people have been saying it. But it's true, we are a nation within a nation, and that's what Black nationalism, I think, whenever we realize that, that's whenever we're strongest, because when you realize that colonialism, that's what's happening, and that there's a Black nation is being colonized by a white nation, that makes you understand that your remedies are going to be different than as a people who's trying to become a part of the dominant society. Instead, you're trying to have justice to control the aspect of society that belongs to you. So I think that was very interesting that even back then that observation was made. And I think that it shows us we got to start looking more backwards and considering what our ancestors told us before, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel just to come to the same conclusions.
Mm. Yeah. I was thinking, reading this section, he was talking about minority and being an alien in this country, and that history, and we think that things have changed so much, just like you were speaking to, but what really happened is things have been designed a certain way to shape us to be more acceptable to our position and condition under colonialism. And so, for instance, even today, we are considered to be minorities. And so why are we considered minorities in this country if everyone is a citizen? So they're telling us that we represent a separate group, that we represent a nation. But we are the only ones who haven't recognized that here in this country, that we are a separate nation. And a minority, and I may have mentioned this before, but minority, according to their sociological terms, is not referring to a numerical number. Like, they're not talking about population wise. When they say minority, they're talking about a group of people who do not receive the same rights. Basically, an oppressed group of people who do not receive the same justice, who are not equal to another group of people within a society. So in South Africa, under apartheid, the white group was considered the majority, and the large African population was considered the minority. So they're telling us right there we're a separate group when they're calling us minority. So we are a nation. We have to recognize this language. But yeah, go ahead, Frank. You want to?
Yeah, just to add to that quick, I think from how they call it, the beginning of this chapter, it also make it clear to us that the reason why our plight are not being answered or are not being looked at, it's just because to the simple fact that we are an oppressed people in America or in any part of the world. We are oppressed nation. And it also went further as saying that because African people see themselves not as African, but see themselves as European, as American, as French or British. This is where also our problem coming from. And because of that, if you see an African man who is in the position of liberating his people or of doing something for his people, even on a continent, you will not see that person doing it, because in the mind of that person, he or she is an American or is a British man or a German man. But in the sense that the reality is that the American or the white do not see you as an American, but they use you. But if you feel that you are American to do the good for America, fine. but we are not looking at you as an American. If you feel you are a British man to die for Great Britain, fine. But mind you, the day you do anything crazy or stupid, excuse me for the word, but that's the time we will classify you as African. And we see that over and over and over and over. For a typical example, we just saw the guy, I think from Mali or from Senegal, so who saved a little child from on a building in France. What did they do? Right there, they gave him French citizenship. Those are the kind of things we're talking about here. Until you can do good before they can classify you as American or as European or as Westerner. But once it comes to the bar and the poor, even all of these in the Bible, the ugly thing, they make it black. The good thing, they make it white. So we see that even in books, even in movies, or even in all of these things, we see it. So in simple, what we're saying here is, look, you are African and you must perform or have an African mindset for African people.
And what you said reminded me of, like you said, the little guy, the guy who saved the girl got French citizenship. It reminded me of, I think it was England. This guy got into some financial problems. He grew up in England, but they're trying to deport this man, quickly. So I always cringe a little bit whenever I hear people take on the colonial identity, whether I hear an African saying that they're French, an African saying that they're English, or an African saying that they're American. I always cringe because of that.
Yeah, this is why it's important that we do define phenomena. To them, we're second-class citizens to them. That's how they would define this, or today, minority. Code word. They'll say minority, and that can't be acceptable by us. No, like we're a nation, an African nation or a Black nation, if you may. I prefer to say African, but we are. The point is that we are a people, and we should be itself. We should think of ourselves as a self-determined people, and organize accordingly. But let's see. Maybe I can get one more paragraph. I know we run out of time.
Yeah, hold on. I think someone is requesting the PDF. I don't know the PDF. What we're reading.
They want to know what we're reading. The Black Radical Tradition.
I think they want a PDF to be posted.
Oh, okay. All right. We can have that PDF posted, and I'm reading from the top of page 80. I guess one more paragraph, see if we have any final thoughts or anything. So the policy of Jim Crow prescription of America's Black folk has resulted over the years in the shaping of the Negro as a distinct economic, historical, cultural, and in the South, geographical entity in American life. The Negro is American. He is the product of every social and economic struggle that has made America. But the Negro is a special kind of American to the extent that his oppression has set him apart from the dominant white nation. Under the pressure of these circumstances, he has generated all the objective attributes of nationhood. The history of the Negro people in the United States is unquestionably intertwined with the history of the rest of the American people. But to say no more than this would be to falsify both the special story of the Negro people and to befog the history of American capitalism. For on the one hand, there were the dominant whites, and among them existed from the beginning the division into economic classes. The Negroes, on the other hand, were forced into the stream of American history in a special manner as oppressed slaves who present positions as a whole people who still bears the mask of the slave lash. So, yeah, any final thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't agree that we're necessarily Americans. I'll say that. I think that, being American connotes that you have some type of recognition of rights, and clearly our people have never obtained that. But I understand the sentiment of saying that we've essentially, I would say we're a part of this American experiment that started with the genocide of Native Americans that
Yeah.
and switched to the genocide of Africans, and now the continual international genocide of indigenous people. But our identity is always something that's going to be a hot topic, I think, and always something that for people to discuss. And I, would push that we continue to have these types of conversations about what our role is inside of the American experiment, as I called it.
I mean, just to add to that, what I would say to my African brothers and sisters, look, it doesn't really matter. We can live in America here, you can live in France, you can live in England. Look, be African. You don't have to be on a continent before you see yourself as African. Live in America here and be African. What is the difference being an American and still being harassed, embarrassed, disgraced? When you get out there, I mean, everything about you is American, right? But have you been looked at as an American? How other Americans are being treated? Why not be African?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that kind of goes to the question that was asked in the chat to the Wanajapo. Why do Black people think that they are Americans? Is it because Mzungu named themselves that? Identifying oneself incorrectly is the confusion source. Please elaborate. And I think Frank, you was getting to it. I quickly would say that because white people were the dominant power after the Civil War, they created these amendments that made African people into Americans. And so there was decision to be made. Some people was talking about repatriating, but I think overwhelmingly a lot of African people, there was a lot of confusion, not knowing where to go, generations of being here and feeling like the only way that they can survive is to integrate into the dominant system. And so the only way to survive within the system is to be a citizen. And anybody that was considered a citizen was American. So it was a political designation that was put on us by the oppressor. But I don't know if anybody want to add to that.
I agree with that. So on top of that, to remember the propaganda campaign that was done to not just erase our African identity, but to demonize Africa and make us think that our people were just savages in the jungles and all that stuff. So when you put that together with what Ikemba was saying, this political designation, we're basically taught that, where else would you rather go? Would you rather be these people who are uncivilized, or would you rather be in the pinnacle of civilization? So always the propaganda aspect is something that's important to remember.
Indeed. Frank, could you let the viewers know what we have coming up before we?
Yeah. So on the 22nd of this month, May 22nd, we will be having a discussion, a panelist discussion, and I'll be the host. We're going to be having it on our channel and on various network as well. So we'll be having some panelists from Africa, and other will be from the United States as well. So we're going to be discussing, and the topic for the discussion is going to be decolonization and the need for a new economic system for African people worldwide, whether on a continent or in America here. So because we should also know that the book even stated that we are an oppressed and colonized state within these European entity or these European nation. So the discussion for the 22nd will be decolonization and the need for a new economic system. So we want to also let our viewer know that it will not just be a discussion where we just going to discuss, okay, decolonization is this, is that, and in the new economic system it should be this. This organization is about solution. Even though we are there to educate people, we are there to bring out the fight as well, but we are also there to organize the masses and to find solution to our problem. So as we discuss, mainly we will be discussing the solution to African problem, the solution to the African economic system. So that will be, that is what, we will be doing on the 22nd of May, and I believe it will be 12 p.m. in the United States here. So we look forward for your support and for for you coming to listen to these panelists and to listen to as well and what we're going to discuss. And all we can ask is keep sharing our channel, liking and subscribe.
All right. Appreciate that. And also on I believe May 25th, we're going to be doing an African Liberation Day event. Tierney, you have some info? Bell me out right now.
No problem. Yeah, the theme is women and Pan-Africanism. So we're going to be discussing the role of powerful women inside of the Pan-Africanist struggle. We have a lot of speakers who are coming on. We have a whole commercial on WCC's YouTube channel if you want to see exactly who's going to be there. But it's going to be a very informative discussion. We're going to have lectures. We're also going to have a panel. So if you would please tune in on May 25th to the African Liberation Day program, we'd appreciate it.
All right. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we will be back here next Saturday at 10 a.m. So until next time, everybody, peace.